Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The sun was barely up over San Clemente Island when the line formed on the sand. Boots sank into the damp grit, uniforms already salty from the breeze coming off the Pacific. Avery Mitchell stood in the second row, shoulders squared, eyes steady. She didn't look left or right. She watched the horizon the way she had trained herself to do, pick a point, breathe, hold it, move when told. To her right, Cole Anderson rolled his neck like a fighter before a bell. Behind them, Mac Turner muttered something to Ryan Bishop that ended with a short laugh and died quickly when Chief Randall Hayes stepped into view. Hayes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You know where you are," he said. "You know what this week is. If you're guessing, you're late." He scanned their faces, landed on Avery for half a second, moved on. Into the water. The cold hit like a warning. Avery's breath caught, then leveled. She drove her arms through the chop, boots heavy, pack heavier, body finding that thin line between control and panic. Cole surged ahead, splashing big, burning energy he'd wish he had later. James O'Connor kept a steady pace beside Avery, eyes forward, no chatter. The current fought them, but the shoreline came back in pieces, foam, sand, the bark of an instructor, the drag in her legs as gravity returned. She stood, water streaming from her sleeves, lungs burning clean. Silver strand drills followed, low crawls, wall surges, rope climbs. Sand got into everything. Avery felt it grind at her palms and under her collar. Hayes walked the lanes with a clipboard and a still face. Cole made the top of the wall first, grinned down, and dropped without waiting for his team. Avery didn't chase him. She set her grip, climbed smooth, swung a leg, and cleared without a stumble. Mac slipped on the descent, she steadied him with a hand and a short nod. "No speeches. Keep moving." By midday they were in the boats, logs on shoulders, steps matched to the count. The rhythm mattered more than any single burst. Ryan started to tilt, James shifted, Avery took a sliver more weight and reset the pace. Cole glanced back once, annoyed at the drag behind him, then looked away when Hayes cut him a look that said finish first, talk second. Lunch wasn't lunch. 10 minutes with a pouch, warm water, and the wind. Avery sat on a crate, boots flat, breathing through the tightness in her ribs from the morning surf. Across the way, Cole held court with two guys who laughed too fast. Mac stretched his shoulders and winced. Ryan stared at nothing. James tapped his boot heel in the sand like he was counting down a clock only he could see. Afternoon meant Mission Bay. The water felt different there, flatter, slicker, but it pulled at you all the same. Dummy drags, partner toes, gear switches mid-swim. Avery's focus cut into blocks of instructions: go, grab, lock, breathe, switch. A recruit on her left started to flail, she hooked his strap, moved him 2 feet to calmer water, and released without a word. Hayes saw it. He didn't write anything. He didn't have to. They ran the bluff at last light, packs thumping, calves on fire. Cole kept a hard pace, but he drifted by the top, hands on knees, chest heaving. Avery arrived seconds later, standing tall until her breathing settled. She looked down the line at the others grinding up the incline and felt that familiar mix of fatigue and clarity. Day one had done what it always did, took away the noise, left the work. Night came with the sound of the pier and a colder wind. Echo Division's barracks smelled like wet canvas, boots, and soap. Avery sat on the step outside, elbows on her knees, listening to the water slap the pilings at Pier Point Lookout. She thought of Luke the way she always did at the end of a day like this, not as a ghost, not as a speech, just a voice that said keep it simple. finish the next thing. Inside, someone laughed too loud and got quiet fast. Cole passed by, didn't say anything, didn't have to. Respect wasn't a word here. It was a record of what you did when it hurt. Lights out didn't mean sleep. It meant stillness. Avery lay on her back, eyes open to the dark, counting her breaths, cataloging what worked and what didn't. The island was quiet except for the water and the wind tapping the window frame. Morning would come fast. She knew what it would ask, and she knew what she had to give. When she finally closed her eyes, her last thought was simple: show up, hold the line, make it through the next wave. That thought was still in her head when the whistle split the dark. Avery rolled off the bunk, boots on, laces yanked tight. The barracks was a rush of canvas, low voices, and the scrape of gear. Cold air hit as the door opened. The beach waited under weak floodlights, the water black and moving. Hayes stood with the cadre, hands behind his back, voice even. Form on the grinder. Pairs. Names were called fast. Mitchell. Anderson. Cole stepped up, jaw tight, a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sand stuck to his boots from the night air. Ready to eat sand, Mitchell, he said low, more reflex than anger. Avery didn't answer. She set her feet on the wet grit and waited for the count. The drill was simple: grip, move, break balance, recover. Not a fight. A test. The whistle snapped again. Cole came hard. He liked to set the tone early. The first lunge missed. Avery pivoted, hands up, weight low, felt the rush of his shoulder slide by. He reset fast, closed the gap, and this time drove a knee into her ribs slick and fast where the ref couldn't quite see it. The shock was clean and bright. Air left her chest. She stepped back once, tasted salt, and heard the water. Cole pressed, thinking she'd fold. She didn't. She let the pain settle into a box and moved around it. He reached for a collar drag. She slipped the hand, turned the corner on his elbow, and used his forward weight to put him offline. Nothing big. Just the angle. He stumbled, caught himself, and swung a forearm. She blocked, felt the ribs flare, and answered with a simple hook behind his heel and a push at his shoulder. He hit the sand, bounced up, face red. Hayes didn't say a word. The cadre watched for control, not drama. Cole came again, less clean now. Avery timed the grab, set a clinch that stole space, and shifted her hips. When he tried to muscle out, she let him go a step and then redirected, putting him down a second time, this one louder. The line around them got quiet. Mac and Ryan stared. James kept his eyes forward but didn't blink. Cole breathed hard, that early smile gone. He charged once more, a half step late, and she slid left, trapped the wrist, and took his balance without force. He landed on one knee. The whistle blew. Switch. They ran sprints to reset the cycle. Avery kept her hands on her ribs while they jogged back to the line. Her breath was shallow and measured. Pain lived there now, but it didn't own the room. The second round was carries in the surf. Partners swapped every 20 yards with waves slapping their legs. Cole grabbed the dummy and tried to set a pace too fast for the team. The water punished him. He stumbled on a trough, almost lost the dummy, and Avery cut across, hooked the strap, and helped stabilize it. No look. No words. Just done. Hayes called for a set of grinder drills, push-ups, flutter kicks, bear crawls, sand sticking to arms and faces. Every rep made her ribs bark. She counted anyway. At 60, the burn evened out. At 80, it was noise. Cole kept glancing over, caught between pride and the fact that she was still there, clean reps, no break. When the rope climb came, she chalked nothing, just gripped and went. The rib pain made the pull slow, but she didn't stop. Cole beat her to the bell by a second, dropped heavy, and hit a wince in his shoulder. She rang next, slid down, feet quiet. They moved to partner wrestling again. The sand was colder. The sky started to gray at the edges. Cole didn't try the knee this time. He shot for a leg. She sprawled, framed his head, and circled to the back. No choke, no crank, just control and pressure until the whistle. When it blew, he rolled away and stared up at the lights for a breath. The cadre rotated pairs. Hayes' eyes met hers for one count and moved on. Sun pushed a thin line across the water. They formed for a short run with packs along Silver Strand. The pace was honest. No show. James slipped on wet sand. Avery grabbed a strap on his pack to steady him. Cole watched it happen, jaw tight, then shifted left to take a touch more weight on the log when they rotated back into carries. It wasn't a speech, but it was a move. The group found a rhythm that didn't exist yesterday. Breakfast was 10 minutes again. Steam from cups, cold wind on wet sleeves. Avery ate slow and breathed through the ribs. Cole stood nearby, quiet now, eyes on the surf. Mac nudged Ryan and nodded toward her like he was saying, "Yeah, I saw it too." Hayes read names off a board for the next block. Mission Bay. Dummy drags. Buddy tows. No gaps. Buses rolled. Gear rattled. The water at the bay looked calm but pulled sideways. On the first set, a recruit from another pair panicked at the buoy turn. Avery saw the flail, cut her line, and reached him in 4 kicks. She rolled him to float, put the dummy strap in his hand, and sent him toward his partner. Then she sprinted back to Cole, who hadn't hesitated to pick up her slack. He didn't say anything when she rejoined. He just matched her stroke and kept pace. They cycled drills through noon. The ribs never stopped hurting. She stopped caring. On land, they did log PT. Hayes walked the line, voice flat. Cadence. Not hero lifts. Avery called the count for their end without thinking. The log stayed level. Cole didn't fight it. He let the cadence hold him up. By evening, fog slid back in off the water. They finished with a bluff run and a short sandbag carry into Echo Division. Lights came on. The day ended where it started, cold, tired, quiet. Avery sat at Pier Point Lookout again, hands on the edge of the rail, breath slow. Cole came up the path, stopped a few feet away, and stayed there. No apology. No congratulations. Just a nod that said he knew exactly what he did and what she did after it. She nodded back once and looked at the water. The week wasn't done. The pain wasn't gone. The line was still there to hold, and in the morning the island would ask again if they belonged. She already knew her answer when the next whistle cut through the fog and turned the island back on. Avery rolled her shoulders once and stood with Echo Division on the sand. Hayes didn't bother with speeches. Buses. Dry Creek. That was all. Packs went on. Boots thudded up the ramp. The ride off the coast was quiet except for gear rattling and the low hum of tired men trying to save breath for later. Cole sat across the aisle, eyes closed, jaw set, not asleep. Mac traced a finger along a frayed strap on his pack and stopped when the bus bumped. Ryan watched the window like the desert might blink first. Dry Creek was heat right out of the door. Air that felt heavier than it looked, dust that stuck to sweat. The course ran long across low hills and shallow gullies, the kind that look easy until your legs start arguing. Hayes split them into teams. Navigation lanes. Checkpoints. Sandbag to the berm. Dummy to the flags. Water discipline. Move. Avery took the map board, not because she asked, but because no one else reached fast enough. North Gully, cut right at the tire stack, she said, simple and even. Cole glanced at her, waited half a beat, then nodded. They moved. First he'll bit hard. The sandbag was heavier than it needed to be. James took front, Avery took rear, and they switched on a short count. Cole wanted to carry long, but the pace proved better when they traded clean. At the first checkpoint, a recruit from another lane was down on a knee, hands on thighs, breathing like a bad engine. Avery looked once, confirmed the cadre was already moving to him, and kept her team online. Dry Creek punished hesitation more than effort. The second checkpoint sat behind a wire maze. They low-crawled, elbows scraping rock, sand filling sleeves. Her ribs lit up on every pull. She didn't stop. On the far side, Ryan's elbow bled small but steady. She wrapped it fast with tape from her pocket while James adjusted the sandbag. "You're good," she said. Ryan nodded and got back under. The dummy drag started ugly. The surface looked firm, then caved. Cole grabbed the shoulder strap and pulled two upright. The dummy dug in. "Lower," Avery said. He dropped the angle and it slid better. 2 lanes over, a team tried to sprint and lost a boot in mud. Hayes watched both lanes and wrote nothing. Sun moved higher. Heat came through boots like a slow stove. Water breaks were measured by Hayes' call, not thirst. They took them without complaint. Halfway through, the course forced a choice: longer route on compact ground or a shorter cut through soft sand and thin sage. Cole wanted the short. "We can take it," he said. Avery looked at the slope, looked at the team, weighed the sandbag, and shook her head. "We'll lose time in the middle." She turned down the longer lane. 20 minutes later, they crossed a ridge and saw the teams that took the cut stuck in knee-deep powder, legs buried, faces pulled tight. Cole didn't say she was right. He didn't have to. He shifted the bag up onto his shoulder and kept walking. The berm drill hit next. Over, down, up again, sandbag always with them. Mac slipped on the down slope and almost rolled his ankle. Avery caught his vest, set him straight, and handed the bag to James without breaking stride. Cole moved to the front on the next rise, set a steady cadence, and checked his pace to match her count. That small change spread through the line. Breathing synced up. Footfalls started to sound like 1 set instead of 4. They hit a mock contact lane near the end. Poppers cracked from a ridge. They had to move the dummy through staggered barriers, stay low, and time their bursts between blasts. Avery called the sequence short: 2 steps, cover, 2 steps, cover. Cole echoed it so the last man would hear. They moved clean. At the final flag, Hayes stood with a stopwatch, face blank. He clicked, looked down, and moved his eyes to the next lane. They ate in the shade of a truck, backs to the hot fender, water sipped small. No one talked much. When the afternoon block started, the desert traded heat for wind. Dust rose and got into their teeth. The last event was a hill repeat with the sandbag, then a distance carry with the dummy back to the assembly line. Avery's ribs ached like a bruise someone kept pressing. She narrowed her world to the count. Up in 8, down in 8, switch on 10. Cole took an extra step to cover Ryan's slow spot and didn't make a thing of it. Mac's hands shook. James told him to reset grip, not attitude. The 4 of them crested the last hill together and came down without stumbling. Back at the island, the light had gone soft and the wind turned cool again. Silver Strand felt almost kind after the desert, but the work didn't care. They dragged boats, ran the last 100 with packs, and then stood in a line while Hayes spoke. "You did not beat the desert," he said. "You managed it." He looked down the row and stopped briefly at Avery, then at Cole. "That's the job." Echo Division smelled like dust and salt when they dropped gear. Avery sat on the floor and untied her boots slow. The skin under the tape on her ribs felt raw and warm. She leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, and let her breath settle. Cole walked by, set a bottle of water on the floor next to her boot, and kept going. No speech. No nod. Just the bottle. Later, she walked to Pier Point. The water was dark and flat, a different kind of hard. She put her hands on the rail again and let the day file itself in order. She thought about the shortcut she didn't take and the time they didn't lose, about the moments where they almost fell apart and the tiny choices that kept them together. The week still had teeth. Tomorrow would bring a bigger test with smoke and noise and moving parts. She didn't chase it with her head. She kept it simple the way Luke taught her. Finish the next thing. Hold the line. When the wind shifted and carried the sound of waves under the pier, she stood, rolled her shoulders once more, and went inside to lay down before the island asked again, and it asked before the thought even cooled. Lights snapped on in Echo Division. Boots on tile. The whistle cut the hall and drove everyone to the door. Avery swung her pack over sore shoulders and fell in with the line. Hayes waited on the grinder, the fog low and the floodlights throwing hard cones across the sand. Full mission sim, he said. Movement to contact. Casualty extraction. Timed. No resets. You fail clean, you fail fast. He pointed to lane markers hammered into the beach. Mitchell, you've got lane 3. Keep your people intact. Cole looked at her once, no smirk, just a read. Mac stretched his hands open and closed. Ryan bounced on his toes twice. James rolled his shoulders. Smoke cracked from a canal to the left, then another, and the siren sound of blanks started up the hill. The horn blasted and they moved. Avery kept the first 10 steps small to lock pace. Low, she said. 2 and 2. Cole echoed it for the back pair and they slid along the berm line as simulated rounds snapped over the dune. First obstacle was a wall with a cutout halfway. They had to push 2 sandbags over and move through in pairs without breaking the stack. Cole took the first bag and boosted it, Avery fed the second. She ducked, pulled Ryan through behind her, and covered left. Poppers went off in the seagrass. She counted 3 beats and moved them again. At the second marker, a cadre stepped out and pointed to a dummy sprawled behind a low barrier. Package and move. Avery went to the shoulders, James to the legs. Cole covered the open flank, eyes on the gap. Ryan clipped the strap and called ready. They lifted on 2 and cleared the barrier with inches to spare. The ground turned uneven, ruts hidden under the sand. The dummy jerked. Avery reset grip and kept cadence steady. A boom of a distraction charge rolled in from the right. Mac flinched, then got back under the weight when Cole said, "Count is the same." They hit the next berm and took a knee. Hayes' voice came thin on the wind, discipline beats noise. They pushed into the maze, sheet metal, pallets, a door frame with no door. Smoke thickened and cut the lights to a gray smear. Avery shifted them by touch. Hand on vest. Don't drift. She led with a hand out just enough to feel the lip of the doorway. On the far side another cadre slammed a board to spike the stress. Cole didn't bite. He held the rear and watched their spacing like a metronome. The maze spat them onto a narrow footbridge thrown across a pit lined with flagged stakes. A signboard read minefield in big letters, not subtle. Planks bowed under weight. Wind shoved at their shoulders. Single file. I go. Ryan next. James with the dummy head. Cole last, Avery said. No debate. She stepped to the first board, tested the give, and let her weight settle. It groaned but held. She moved 3 boards, turned her shoulder, and guided Ryan's hand to the next seam. James came in tight with the dummy. Halfway, a concussion pop went off at their 9 o'clock and Ryan froze. His toe slid off the board and the plank dipped. Avery reached back, caught his sleeve, and shifted her own weight forward to balance them both. Her ribs screamed. She didn't move her face. Breathe. Step back to center. Ryan's boot corrected. James inched the dummy forward without letting its legs pendulum into the stakes. Cole stayed last and called timing. Now. Hold. Now. They cleared the bridge in a slow line and collapsed the carry back into the lane. Heart rates came down 5 beats. The course turned uphill into scrub. The route marked by glow sticks instead of stakes, and every third one was a fake that led into soft ground. Avery checked the map board hanging on her chest and cut left around a ditch just before a recruit from lane 2 slid into it with a shout. She kept her count tight. 6 on, switch. At the crest they got the second casualty, a lighter dummy on a travois. Hayes' cadre tossed them a strap and started a clock. Extraction window 5. Don't get cute. Cole hooked into the harness without waiting for permission and drove the first 20 yards. Avery kept the rear guide line low so the travois wouldn't bounce and flip. Mac stumbled on a rock and swore under his breath, then squared up and kept the line tight. James spotted the markers and called, left, low branch. They ducked. Blanks cracked again and a horn blared behind them like they were being bracketed. Avery didn't rush the corners. Fast in the wrong place is slow. She held pace and let Cole's power live inside the cadence. At the last turn, the lane pinched to a crawlspace dug under a beam. The travois wouldn't fit high. Unload, Avery said. They lifted the dummy, passed it hand to hand, and slid through on elbows. Her ribs lit again. She pushed through the sting and cleared space for the rest. On the far side, Mac's grip faltered and the dummy slipped. Cole grabbed the shoulder web and saved it an inch from the sand. He didn't even look proud. He just shoved it toward James and said, move. They broke into the final straight with a downhill that wanted to turn ankles. Avery cut an S so the weight stayed centered, and they hit the finish cone as Hayes clicked the stopwatch. 3:58, he said, eyes still flat. Hydrate. Reset for second run. No praise. No flair. Just the job again. They jogged back to the start and did it all over. The second run was cleaner. Ryan never froze at the bridge. James found a shorter line through the pallets. Cole watched the flanks without drifting. Avery didn't make speeches. She made counts and choices. When they crossed the line the second time, Hayes let the stopwatch hang from his finger and finally gave a half-inch of nod. That's closer to a team. They weren't done. The cadre rolled them straight into a short surf insertion and a beach drag. Suits went heavier with water. The sand got meaner. Avery kept the pull even and let the pain in her ribs burn down to something she could carry without thinking about it. When the horn ended the block, everyone looked a size smaller from the water weight and the hit of the day. Hayes lined them up under the dim lights and spoke like the ocean wasn't throwing noise over his words. You're learning to hear the right thing. Keep it. Back at Echo, the hull buzzed low. Mac leaned against a locker and closed his eyes. Ryan sat on the floor and untied his laces with shaky fingers. James wiped soot off his face with a dry sleeve and missed a streak on his cheekbone. Cole stood in the doorway like he was about to say something and then didn't. He just knocked his knuckles once against the frame and walked. Avery sat on her bunk, tape crinkling in her hands as she reset the wrap on her ribs. The room went quiet the way it does after a siren stops. Later, the pier was dark and the wind colder than the night before. She didn't stay long. She didn't need the talk in her head tonight. The sim had taken something and given something back. The team felt different now, not filed under names but under movements that lined up. She lay back, eyes open to the dark, and let the day stack itself in order. The island would ask again before it was light. She had her answer ready when the whistle broke the thin edge of dawn and turned the barracks into motion again. Avery was on her feet before the second blast, pack up, boots tight, ribs taped. The air outside was colder than yesterday, the kind that made your lungs feel clean for a second and then heavy. Hayes stood under a floodlight with the board in his hand. Final gauntlet, he said. Swim, obstacle, navigation, extraction. You finish as a unit or you don't finish. He didn't ask if they were ready. He started the clock. Mission Bay first. The water looked flat but pulled sideways hard enough to steal a stroke if you got lazy. Avery set the line off the buoy and didn't overtalk it. 2 up, 2 cover. Switch at the mark. Cole matched her pace without trying to win the first 100 yards. Ryan found a steadier kick than yesterday. James stayed tight inside the lane rope on the turns and didn't waste a second looking for a lifeguard that wasn't there. A recruit in the next lane choked and rolled. Avery checked that the cadre boat was already moving and kept her count. At the far flag they swapped to dummy drags. The straps bit into wet gloves. The current tried to slant them off course. They leaned into it and made the shoreline with no lost gear and no yelling. Silver Strand was already hot with bodies when they hit the obstacle field. Sand stuck to wet sleeves. The rope climb burned palms that were tired of being burned. Avery's ribs flared on the second pull and she ignored it. Cole rang the bell a half step before her and dropped clean. Mac kept his eyes on his own rope, not their pace. Ryan almost slipped and recovered with a tight knee pinch he'd failed yesterday. James landed light and moved to the wall without waiting for applause that didn't exist. Hayes walked through with a pen in his mouth and didn't write anything. Low crawl. Mud that wasn't deep but grabbed anyway. Elbows scraped, knees bit, and somewhere in the middle a cadre kicked a board to spike everyone's flinch. Avery didn't lift her head. She kept the line straight. On the far side, they took a breath that wasn't a break and picked up the log. Cadence, she said. Cole echoed it. They lifted on her count and carried like one thing instead of 4 different people trying to prove 4 different points. A team 2 lanes over tried to surge and paid for it with a dropped end and a chewing from an instructor. Avery didn't look over. She kept the number steady and the steps clean. Navigation next, the tighter, inland loop marked with glow sticks and lies. The sun was up enough to make shadows weird. The map board looked simple until it didn't. Avery chose the longer hardpack over the short soft cut again. Cole didn't argue. Ryan took bearings without talking. James spotted the hidden ditch before it stole a boot. At the second checkpoint, a cadre pointed at a travois and a dummy and said one word, go. They hooked it fast. Cole drove the front. Avery kept the guide low. Mac, still breathing hard, found a gear when the ground turned to marbles and kept the line straight. They passed a pair stuck in brush and didn't get stuck with them. The last third hurt in new ways because that's what the last third does. The course climbed a bluff with loose rock and rolled down into soft sand that took twice the energy for half the distance. Avery cut an S so the weight didn't run away at the bottom. Her ribs barked on every switch and went quiet when her head got small enough. The pier came into view for the first time like a clock. Hayes' voice carried flat on the wind. Window is closing. Don't make me watch you sprint in the wrong place. They hit the final lane, casualty across a zigzag of pallets, under a beam crawl, over a low wall, and across a short span of planks. The pallets flexed. The crawl made ribs curse. The wall was nothing if your legs listened. The span was the same narrow bridge they'd seen in the sim, only slicker. Avery tested the first board. Single file, she said. Same order. Ryan nodded like he'd been waiting to do it right. James tucked the dummy in. Cole watched the rear and called the timing. A bang went off wide and nobody froze. They moved across clean and didn't look down. The finish cone sat stupidly plain on flat sand. They didn't sprint. They didn't spread. They held formation and crossed like they started. Hayes clicked the stopwatch and let it hang from his hand while he looked at them one by one. Sand stuck to faces. Water dripped from sleeves. Breathing sounded like a room full of engines that hadn't cooled yet. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. He just said, that's a team, like a diagnosis. They weren't done. The cadre threw in one more surf hit to clear whatever pride had slipped in. Cold water stole heat they didn't have. The boat felt heavier than the numbers said. Avery called the lift and the turn. Cole took a fraction more at the bow without show. Mac grinned once like he couldn't help it and then shut it down. Ryan counted breaths instead of steps. James kept eyes on the shore and didn't let the boat yaw. When the horn finally ended it, they were smaller from the water and bigger from the work. Back on the grinder, Hayes read the board with a pen. Mitchell's Lane, no penalties. Time inside the window. Extraction intact. He looked up, not past them, at them. You kept each other moving. That's the only thing I care about. He dismissed them without more. A few claps cracked down the line and died on their own. Echo Division felt warmer than it was. Steam rose off racks and sleeves. Someone laughed the kind of laugh that lives somewhere between relief and emptiness. Avery sat on the edge of her bunk, unwrapped the tape, and touched the bruise under it like you tap a door to make sure it's shut. Cole stepped into the doorway and didn't lean on anything. Good work, he said, like a fact. He held out a hand. She took it. Shake, one beat, done. Mac walked by and tapped the door frame twice like a superstitious ballplayer. Ryan dropped onto the floor and let his head hit his pack. James tossed Avery a clean roll of tape and didn't wait to see if she caught it. Near sunset, they formed up again for a short word no one asked for but everyone needed. Hayes stood where he always stood and let the ocean throw noise around the edges. You finished the thing most people tell themselves they can't, he said. Remember that the next time you want to think small. He broke them without ceremony. Avery walked to Pier Point out of habit, not to make a moment. The water was calmer than yesterday, the wind light, the sky holding that long California fade that isn't really pretty when you're this tired, it's just honest. She put her hands on the rail and let her head get quiet. Luke wasn't a speech in her ear. He was a simple line, finish the next thing. Today they had. Tomorrow wasn't a promise or a threat. It was the same question the island kept asking. She didn't have to practice her answer anymore when dawn slid in without color and made everything look like it had been washed in the same quiet. Echo Division stirred slow, no whistle this time, just the light and the habit of getting up before it arrived. Avery swung her legs out of the bunk and felt every yard of yesterday in her calves and in that one sharp line along her ribs. The room was calm. Mac laced his boots with a small grin he didn't explain. Ryan stretched his shoulders and rolled his neck like he'd finally slept. James folded his tape and tucked it away like a ritual. Cole stood in the doorway and looked at the hallway as if it might ask for one more round. It didn't. They formed on the grinder out of instinct. Hayes walked out with the board under his arm and no pen. The ocean put white edges on the waves and the air was clean enough that you could smell salt before you tasted it. He let the silence sit. Hell Week is what it is, he said finally. Some of you showed up ready to make noise. Some of you learned to listen. His eyes moved down the line, not hunting, just landing. You finish this as individuals, you lose the point. You finish as a unit, you earn your next step. He called lanes and names. A cadre handed out simple patches and the kind of nod that matters here because no one wastes it. When he reached Avery, he didn't raise his voice or change the script. He just handed her the patch and held her eyes for a count. You kept your people moving, he said. It was the same sentence as yesterday, but this time it felt like a door that stayed open. She said, yes, Chief, because there wasn't anything else to say. Cole got his patch a breath later and didn't look sideways. He didn't need to. There wasn't a ceremony people would film. There was gear to be cleaned, racks to be stripped, sand to be swept out of places that weren't meant to hold it. They stacked boats, coiled lines, checked knives, and found the last of the tape stuck to elbows and knees. Avery worked the list the way she'd worked each lane, one thing, then the next, no speech. Mac and Ryan argued about who had left a strap untied yesterday and laughed halfway through it. James fixed a buckle without being asked. Cole carried 2 extra crates to the shed and didn't make a show of it. When the work ended, the day felt long even though it was barely 9. Hayes dismissed them to chow and told them to be back in an hour for the debrief. The mess hall was loud in a way that didn't hurt. Trays clattered. Coffee steamed. Someone told a story about the second run through the maze and turned the board slam into a joke. Avery ate slow, not because she was trying to stretch it, but because the chewing felt like a thing she could finally do without counting. Cole sat across from her and didn't fill the air with anything that needed answering. "Not bad," he said, which here meant good. She nodded once. "Not bad." The debrief wasn't a speech either. It was measured. What worked? What didn't? The desert choice that saved time. The bridge that almost took it back. The cadence on the log that made 4 backs carry 1 weight. Hayes didn't list heroes. He listed decisions. "You will forget the pain faster than you think," he said. "You will remember the moments you made a clean call and held it." He looked at the board, then at them. "Some of you came here to prove something to someone you'll never meet. That's fine. But this is the only proof that matters." He tapped his knuckles against the wood, "the record of what you did under pressure with other people depending on you." Afterward, they were cut loose for a few hours. The island felt different, not kinder, just less like it was trying to throw them off. Avery walked the path to Pier Point because it was the place where the day could arrange itself in her head. The water curled against the pilings and the breeze pushed hair loose from her tie. She put her hands on the rail and let the ache in her ribs settle. Luke wasn't a speech now either. He was the simple idea that got her here: finish the next thing, and the next thing will teach you how to finish the one after that. Footsteps came up the boards. Cole stopped beside her with the same posture he had on the grinder, hands quiet, eyes on the line where ocean meets fog. "Didn't think you'd make it," he said, not like an insult, like a fact he'd been forced to update. Avery glanced at him once. "You weren't the only one," she said. He chuckled once, short. "Yeah." He left it there. He didn't apologize for the knee and the ribs, and she didn't ask him to. On this island, the ledger got balanced in other ways. He had steadied the line when it mattered. He had carried more when Ryan faded. He had kept his mouth shut when counting was more useful than talking. That was its own accounting. They walked back without deciding to and split at the barracks door with a nod. Inside, Mac had a sock halfway on and 1 boot already tied. "Laundry might kill me," he said, grinning. Ryan had written a list on a scrap of cardboard: gear to replace, blisters to drain, calls to make. James lay on his bunk with his forearm over his eyes and headphones in but no music playing. Avery sat, retaped the ribs because routine didn't turn off just because a clock said it could, and stared at the ceiling for a minute longer than she needed to. Afternoon turned into something like free time. Some guys slept like they were trying to make up for a lifetime. Some cleaned their rifles twice just to move their hands. Avery took a short run along Silver Strand, not for speed, just to feel the ground under her feet without someone blowing a whistle on top of it. She stopped at the top of the bluff and looked down at the water swallowing and giving back the same stretch of sand it always had. The island didn't change. People did. Evening brought a sky that refused to pick a color: blue, then gray, then a thin belt of orange that faded before anyone could call it pretty. Hayes passed by the barracks and didn't stop. He didn't need to check if the rooms were squared. The rooms were squared. He'd taught them how to square themselves. Avery stood at the doorway with her hands on the frame and felt the quiet settle in a way it hadn't since she'd arrived. The week had taken something from all of them, but it had also left something that wasn't there before: the knowledge that when it got loud and stupid and sharp, they could make small, clean choices until the noise ran out of room. Lights out came soft. No siren. No horn. The island didn't need to shout to be heard anymore. Avery lay on her back, eyes open, and let the day do what it always did after work, stack itself into a shape that made sense. She thought of the first morning on the sand, of cold water cutting breath, of Hayes' voice sitting low across the beach, of Cole's knee, and the instant it stopped being a story about him and started being a record about her. She thought of Luke the way you think of a distance you've already walked, not as a myth, but as a line that exists because your feet put it there 1 yard at a time. Sleep crept in slow. Before it reached her, she made a simple promise that didn't need a witness: keep counting clean. Keep the cadence honest. Keep your people moving. The island would ask other questions soon, harder ones with fewer cones and boards and timers. That was fine. She didn't have to practice her answer. She had already said it with her hands, her breath, and the weight she chose to carry when it wasn't hers alone. And when morning came again, and it would, she'd do the same thing she'd done every day since stepping onto this sand: show up, hold the line, and finish the next thing.